I think. So when was able to post it, although I thought I posted it last Monday, but I realized when I went to make the invitation for today's meeting that wasn't there, so I must not have saved it or something. But anyway, that recording from last week is available.
Well,
You
people will
think
miss all the
people are
amazing
watching?
things we just said in the first 2 minutes.
Yeah, just whatever you don't tell anybody about it. We need to
Yeah,
keep
yeah,
it
yeah.
to
Oh,
themselves.
those top secret pro tips.
Yeah.
Did you
The
know people are watching to the video or?
I hear people say they'll make comments that they have, and and eventually, I think who knows, more people probably will. So I think also as the older the video gets, maybe the more interesting it will be. Especially, gosh, remember that guy from 20 years ago? He's on a video.
Well, and it might be worth exploring a different time to see if we could attract some additional folks
Yeah,
from the group. So we do know, as you've mentioned before, that there's a bit of a language barrier for some participants, but
yeah,
maybe some people want to hold it in different languages. That'd be cool too.
yeah.
Yeah,
That would be.
I speak Spanish as well, so we can talk in Spanish if you want. We are now, I think, more like the Three Musketeers or something, eh? Because
Yeah,
we are with the same people.
yeah. Lately, eventually, in the future, it says, "Oh man, this is a pre-AI people." That's what a waste of time that was for those folks.
I'm reading a book about AI, but it's coming.
Well, on the language side, it's pretty fascinating because
Yeah,
you can get near time translation and in some cases real time if you're using a dedicated system. So for listening in on a conversation in another language, it's already partially viable for some contexts, and for kind of real time translation, that's not far behind.
oh yeah, some of that stuff is pretty cool. I mean, there's a lot of controversy surrounding that. Like my wife, she's a retired professional, but she still works. She's got papers to do and so forth. And one of her colleagues got wrapped up in a Chat GPT thing where he
Mhm.
submitted a paper with references that weren't real.
Yeah,
Now he's having to live that. I mean, he's getting blackballed. He just made this mistake
yeah.
and
Well, and you
carelessly
had
sent
various
something out.
lawyers put forward, their presentations with sham legal cases or made up ones. So that's not
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
They have investigated, in the book, they say they have investigated people who use ChatGPT and who don't use. And then they say they grow 50% more fast than the others in a control group. Huh? They have checked it.
Grow
So,
in what sense?
sorry?
Can you elaborate a little bit further?
like how is
Yeah,
it growing?
yeah, it's growing. Yeah.
Oh, I see. The use of it is growing.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking there's another paper or earlier this week that was talking about cognitive engagement and seeing some differences this has been a worry for a while, like in an academic context. We worry that if students aren't going through the effort to kind of develop their critical thinking, but they're using shortcuts like ChatGPT to help them to do some of that lift, they don't actually kind of grow that kind of intellectual understanding. And there seems to be some research backing that up now that there's a cognitive difference in terms of people's understanding, depending on how they're using these tools. And that's more impactful perhaps for novices than it is for experts because the experts have a lot more ability to kind of engage. And they have a different way of critically working with the tool as opposed to someone who's newer to a field and is more dependent.
Yeah.
yeah,
Sometimes I use it for my photos now as well because they know everything. So you put your photo inside and you give critics if you want. And
Yeah,
then
that's fascinating.
and
But so
then
what kind of critique are you
things
getting?
that you don't see by yourself.
Hmm.
He tell you. Or when I go for a photo shoot, I say I go to the station, what can I shoot there, or how I need to do it, what lens I need, from what viewpoint, or he gives me ideas.
Yeah,
So that's for things like that, it's good because the ideas he mentioned is far more than you can think and more quick. So if I ask myself, what can I do? I write 10 things on the paper, but he he makes 100 in 1 minute, and then he takes the best of it, the best, the top 10, and this is far more better than I have put on my paper.
Right. I used to use an app called, I think, a photographer's ephemera,
Yeah.
and it was all to do with helping you to know, like, okay, at a certain time of day, in certain locations, this is the angle of light, this is where the moon is rising, this is where, different kinds of attributes of mostly light will have an impact on the kind of things you might be interested in as a photographer, like harsh shadows or different qualities of light, or it could even factor in weather factors or weather conditions into it. And it was quite interesting to kind of think about that. And I know a lot of folks who capture those, like when you catch the full moon being held by a sculpture or something like that, they're
Yeah.
usually using those kinds of applications to get the position in advance.
The one I've heard a lot talk about is photo pills.
Photo pills.
Photo pills. I think it's PILS. At least the people in my photography club do that. And with my photography club, speaking of AI, we suddenly started getting an AI recommended, click here to get a review of your photo, and we'll explain how you can improve your photography and stuff. Totally unsolicited. So we're like, what the heck? Because this is supposed to be, you're not supposed to be able to post anything in the group unless you're a member of the group. And this is coming from the outside.
Mhm.
It's like
And
it's literally an AI invaded our page. So now it's blocked now. But
Not everything is good in AI. Yeah.
No.
We've been wanting to train on your photos.
Sometimes you tell him, look at photo number this, and then he have in his mind only the description. He cannot combine description and numbers. That's difficult for him.
Yeah.
Well, you can sort of be the infinite number of monkeys thing, where a computer can do things so quickly. You could have random sentences created about anything, and then they could take these sentences to determine if they're grammatically correct, then say, oh, this is a photograph, or this is something else, a real estate deal. And then they could actually weed out all these sentences that could be useful to people, even though there's no real intelligence involved.
Yeah.
No, but it is feeded by the people.
Yeah.
I think when you have all photographers in the world, they are better than I am. So I can grow and learn from this machine because it's feeded with a lot of experience and professionality.
Well, but I guess the thing that's still really interesting. So it has a lot of context and has growing context, including context that is what it's generating critique from. It has no understanding. It doesn't know meaning at all. It's just putting forward information that seems to be applicable according to patterns that it has kind of built into its predicative model. Now we're moving into kind of intelligent agents within AI as well, which will perhaps create a different level of engagement. But right now, it's just all based upon word encodings and prediction in terms of one thing being close to another. But it's really seductive in terms, like, if a machine talks back to us, we'll think we're in a conversation, and we're easily swayed by that.
For example, I'm busy with series now.
Mhm.
I'm busy with series about In a Hurry. And then I have, for example, I want 4 photos, and I have already 3. And ask him what is the 4th photo I can make. And then he based his opinion on the 3 photos I've given him. So
That's fascinating.
yeah. So I give him my team and 3 photos, and then he say, well, you can do this. Or he tells me as well, for example, I make a kind of photos. I'm always on the same place. And so, for example, I am always on 2 meters. He say to me, you have to be more not so brave. You have to be more. You cut out the faces, or you do something what you don't do never, because then you get pictures of a different level. He said, and then you can publish in the newspaper later. And I asked him then, will you come as well? And then he's smiling. He say, no, you know, I am a machine that cannot come.
Well, it's funny if you're actually polite and say kind of please or thank you or things like that in some of these language models, you can sometimes get better results. So
Yeah,
like it's like this is a very weird space, a weird,
yeah,
very very interesting dynamics that are coming forward right now.
Yeah.
yeah. I have a website as well, and I asked him to look at the website. He said, well, you can do something better. So, and he gave me some. I'm not a computer fanatic, but I know a little bit about programming.
Hmm.
But he tells me what's wrong with my website. So and he tells me how to do it as well. So if I don't know where the button is, I ask him where is the button, and if he cannot find him, I make a screenshot, and then he analyzes the screenshot and they say, well, you have to put this button there.
Interesting.
Now, do you have a photography website? Is that it?
Yeah,
Would you mind sharing the link?
no problem. I just was busy with photos. I can share it.
Yeah, placement of buttons and stuff, because I had to deal with a lot of that with Otis, and we were constantly struggling with people in Asia because they have a different mindset as to what's good. They like a lot of empty space, and they like people to have to scroll around on the page. And like our hospital check-in thing, where you check in for your procedure or something like that, they have a kiosk, and it's like basically it's an iPad. And every next button, you have to scroll up to get to the next button. And old people generally they don't know that what am I supposed to do now? And the ladies always having to tell them to scroll up to click the button, which I don't think that's not intuitive at all. But to people in Asia, think that that is intuitive.
Well, that's how they see, how they read, how culturally how things are laid out. I love your background on your website, Jan. That's great.
I lost the. Oh, there it is.
I just made I put some photos in it because before there was only a link to Flickr, but now it's not working any longer because in the 15th of May everything is changed. So because I'm not a paying member, they broke the link as well.
Oh gosh, you can't put it up in your kind of about.
No,
Hmm.
not any longer. Yeah, you can put it and then they show only one photo. You cannot scroll any longer.
Right.
So what software is this or what website?
What is WordPress?
Yeah, it looks
Oh,
like
WordPress.
WordPress.
Okay.
Yeah, WordPress is really powerful.
Yeah. I'm not doing a lot in it, but now because I'm working on the project, I try to make it better.
I'll have to pour over this thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
No problem. You have a website as well?
I'm
I
working. Go ahead. Go
Oh, I
ahead.
was going to say I have over the years, but then I have a strange relationship with the way I've shared pictures over the years. So I've predominantly been doing it on Flickr, and then I have a lot of stuff I do using iCloud with my Apple accounts, but that's mostly private or like family stuff, or when I'm sharing stuff with friends that maybe I've taken pictures at a party or something, and I'm just now in this kind of weird moment where even though I've tried to do everything in my world to have no involvement with Meta. I'm thinking now I probably need to get an Instagram or set up an Instagram account because I've avoided it like the plague because I've been shooting a lot of concert photography and I want to share with the artists and it's really kind of clunky to do it otherwise.
Yeah,
So I now have these three different streams, maybe a fourth stream that I have with all these different platforms that I'll share pictures for different audiences for different purposes.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you're going to do a music stuff, you're going to do Instagram.
Yeah. I am discovering that. And when you're talking to this young musician about, sharing something, you realize, you're saying, well, no, not doing that. No, I'm not doing that. And then you kind of feel like you're like 623 years old and still using like cuneiform or something to try to hand them their picture, because there
Yeah.
are, like it is a whole different channel of communication.
Do you have Instagram as well?
Well, I don't. I've stayed away. I try to
Speaking of
stay away from
photoshoppy,
that
sir, I have
a
some good
lot.
news for
So
you. Have a look at this photo. Tons of reflections
Oh,
completely
hang on a
visible.
minute.
All you have to do is to go to filter and then
There we go. I was looking for something. I ended up clicking a YouTube video. Go ahead,
But
please.
as I said, I'll set one up because I think that that's a channel that would be useful for that particular purpose.
Now, the problem I have with Instagram is that the vertical format and the image quality is not good.
Yeah.
No.
But I just like you, I need to embrace it one way or another. I'm not
It
what
will
I do.
embrace you.
What's that?
It will embrace you.
I mean, I go to Instagram. There's some really fun videos to watch if you look for fun videos. Anyway, what I do, I have trying to find the link to it. Adobe Portfolio, which is free. If you do Creative Cloud, you got Portfolio, so you can sort of make your own web page. And they have another thing, and I can't remember the name of it now, where it's even more. It's more in depth. But it's not a bad. That's not a bad way to do it. Now, it used to be so you could link the full size images from Flickr right into Adobe Portfolio. I think after that change from last May 15th, that might no longer be valid.
Yeah, I think that's the case, yes.
Yeah. But Adobe Portfolio is another way to do it.
But actually, it's better to put your photos on your own website because then you have everything in your own hand and you don't
Yeah.
have to worry.
Yeah, I've been thinking about Wix or MySpace, not MySpace, but the other. One of the ones you always get the ads for all the time. Wix is supposed to be the best one.
Yeah, they have a company here named Strato, and there you can have for $60 every year you can have a website. So, and you need to do it by yourself, but now $60 is payable, I think, and then you can do everything what you want.
And I can create my own website, but the problem is I don't like porting it to other devices like iPhones, and that's a pain in the
Well, some
neck.
of the-
So it's
Yeah, that's
if you get like Wix or something like that, they'll automatically do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So Wix and WordPress and that you can choose themes that kind of will help you with mobile or desktop platforms. So they work quite well.
Now, as far as what I do for my photography, I mean, right now my wife's got this gigantic garden in the back. I mean, it's not really that big; it's just really compressed. So I just go out the back door, and I got all these flowers and insects to take photos of. So when you go to do your photography, though, how far do you guys have to go to take pictures?
No, I'm not going so far. I mostly go to Leiden or The Hague or Amsterdam. Amsterdam is 26 kilometers. That is the most far. But there are people who say, well, I need to have a course, and they go to France or go to Italy or we have my mother-in-law is living in Spain, so I go there often in Alicante. So
Lovely.
every year I go there through 3 times or 4 times sometimes, yeah, mostly. So Alicante I know well, and I know a lot about Spain because my wife is Spanish spoken, and we have seen there a lot. So actually, it is Spain and the surrounding here, and before I met my wife 20 years ago, I was traveling around the world. But yeah, since she is here, we are not going so far any longer because yeah, it's more family life than travel.
Yeah. I think for me to respond to your question, Teddy, in some respects, I carry a camera all the time. I've really bought into the idea of everyday carry, and that
Yeah.
might be a phone, but more often I always do prefer to also have a camera with me because the phone is a camera I recognize, but I shoot differently when I'm using a proper camera. So I go to work, I walk around my neighborhood, I go out to a club or to an event, I will have a camera with me. And so that means that I can walk outside to my front yard and I'll take pictures of stuff there, the plants, the cats, the whatever, chickens. I have chickens in my yard, so they factor in from time to time because they're fun. And then my whole neighborhood, and as I walk through it, and we've talked before about over the years how you become familiar with places and you maybe shoot them a little bit differently. Like I know where to go to look for things in my neighborhood, so I go and look at different times of the year, different times of day. And then I purposely go out to places. So, I have 3 or 4 community gardens nearby that I know have certain kind of potential. There's one that I shoot a lot at, maybe 15 minutes away from me that I go to specifically because it's just of a certain kind of well, it has an old orchard that's over 50 years old. It's got all of these kind of strange combinations of things in terms of the environment there because of the nature of the plots. So I'll go seek out that kind of thing. And then I plot whole days where I'm traversing parts of the city to get to a neighborhood to take pictures. And that might be, a 10-minute walk. It might be a half an hour bike ride or scooter ride or, any number of things. But I very much build that into how I kind of try to live my days and how I want to have a camera with me so that I can document things as I go. And document maybe is too strong a word. I am taking pictures and sometimes with more intent, sometimes because, wow, that's kind of something cool that I
Yeah,
can.
this is how it works, huh?
Yeah.
Sometimes you make a day with 4 good pictures, and then 4 days you have nothing.
Yeah. But I think, when you're walking out with or without a camera, over time, and that time might be a number of years, you develop kind of an instinct to be paying attention to what you see. And I think the key thing is developing how you see and your curiosity to see. And that includes things that you see, like, I have so many things that I've been trying, like right now, I'm just looking at a picture on my screen that I took in that garden where um, I went there, let's say 3 weeks ago, and there was a plot of someone's plot that had all of these strings all over the place. And so I went in there and I was playing around just saying, okay, rule of thirds, rule of thirds, rule of thirds with the string suspended between sticks. When I went back last weekend, there are 1,000 kind of plants shooting up all in that area with these kind of little tiny flowers at the top of long stems, and then all of this cottonwood that's kind of fallen in and got tangled up. So, I'm looking at that same plot that I saw 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago and tried to do a certain thing to figure out. And now I'm trying to figure out how do I shoot through a field of these kind of little budding flowers with all of these details to try to catch for, like sometimes maybe a really deep depth of field, other times very shallow depth of field, other times sticking the camera in the midst of it so you get stuff that's in front of your field of focus or behind or, some combination. Like how do you shoot on it, through it, above it, below it, and just try to puzzle out how do you deal with that. And so when I look at when I look at the photos that you two share, I like sometimes seeing like, yeah, and the angle that you come at. Well, I mean, this foot angle here on that runner is fantastic, but like, the one from above, and sometimes when you're shooting from above down, or Teddy, the way you are shooting, the details of a plant or a flower and the way you're coming at an iris, for instance, and some of the different ways you come at irises and trying to figure out how can I then, kind of have a broader repertoire for how I approach something. And of course, the light and the circumstances come into it too, but it's just kind of nice to play with spaces and try to see what you see. And I think if you carry a camera in a familiar place, might be a bit more prone to experiment that way because you're not just trying to see everything new. You're getting comfortable with the things that you know are there and trying to explore them a little bit.
But you have as well as I have that you see from your eyes in a corner you see something, and next day you say you go back because you have seen something,
Yeah.
and then when you go there, yeah, I try, but I don't know how it works with you. To
Well,
walk around and think 10 minutes before I start shooting. because
Yeah, well, and I also do this though. I mean, there are times when I'll see something, say, well, I'll come back later and get it. And I sometimes stop myself, well, no, just get a shot
No.
now and you can come back later. But if I see something, I try, if circumstances allow, I try to at least, if I've noticed something, I should shoot it.
yeah, because
And then
tomorrow
I can always come back.
maybe it's not there tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more in that light. But I take your point about, or how I interpreted what you were saying in terms of there, like if I walk into a place with a lot of people and it's very busy, there are times where it would be really beneficial for me to walk around a little bit before I kind of, start to take some pictures, because then it gives me a chance to get a sense of it. But then there are other times that, like, I was walking with a couple of friends through a busy street at, like, 12:30 at night. And, it wasn't a matter of dwelling. I'm walking through and I'm taking pictures. So it depends a lot on your circumstances at the time in terms of what you're doing. But it's nice to just be aware of, sometimes you're just shooting in the moment. Other times you're trying to take the time to figure out, well, what's here? And take a
Sometimes
little
when
bit more time.
you go back, it's not there any longer. Eh?
Yeah. Or the lights changed, the people are not there, any number of things.
Yeah, I think what we were talking about earlier, and that was part of the discussion we had with Flickr, is about the intention of the photographer. And sometimes the intention doesn't really happen. You don't come about, I'm going to take this particular type of photo when I go out. Sometimes it just happens.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, you're shooting something, and then he goes, oh, look at that. Oh, why not? Try. Oh, wow, what about over here? You mean this stuff just pops in you. And that's part of the fun, in my opinion, of the creative process.
Yeah, mostly street photographers say, shoot first, think later, because if you don't shoot, it's over.
Yeah.
Because in the street, it's, for example, when you are looking at faces or gestures, or that's just a second, and then it's over. So you don't need to think a lot, because when you think, then you can do it later maybe, but
Yeah, if in doubt, shoot.
Yeah.
Now, when you were talking about, Jeff, when you were looking through the strings and the cottonwood leaves coming down through it, and you were trying to figure out your depth of field and where you should place that and stuff like that. And that brought to mind, because what I do a lot of, like, you probably have seen some of mine, like water droplets or dewdrops on grass,
Yeah,
and leaves and things like that. Okay, so if you have a yard at all where there's going to be moisture on the grass, if you get your camera down low with a macro and you change the focus and you can look through it, it's like there's an entire world you can go through. And from one camera position, depending on where you focus, you're going to get unique photographs. Now, of course, you're going to be droplet photos, but that's how you could approach something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be grass or macro. If you just maybe shoot sort of the concept of a focus stack, where let's start out close and then shoot at every foot and just see what you come up with.
Yeah, and I use an approach like that sometimes, where I think I've mentioned, like, I'll sometimes shoot, like, as you know, I like shooting wide open because I love the depth effects like that. But I'll sometimes shoot wide open, maybe f4 and f8 depending on what I'm doing, and see what the effect is, especially when I'm shooting macro. And that becomes really interesting in terms of just kind of experimentation. And then there are other times when I'm, my real goal might be, like, I'll look through things because I know, let's say, behind a blossom or behind a shape, there's a bright object or there's a colored object, and my goal might be to frame something sharp against a background wash of whatever light is behind it. So I'm trying to think of the layers. Or we've talked before about if you're shooting, let's say, blossoms or leaves into trees, trying to figure out, what's the right angle into a space that is very three-dimensional, but you're trying to render it in a two-dimensional way that is kind of whatever you're visualizing. So, the ways in which you do that, either with depth of field or with the way in which you're positioning yourself into a scene, with colored lights or reflections, that's another way in which, where you position yourself in terms of a reflection can really matter in terms of what you get, because you're trying to assemble incident light in a spot that kind of shows a certain angle. And sometimes you happen across that with just luck. Other times you put yourself there so that you have a better chance of capturing what you want. But yeah, all of those things are really wonderful. I mean, again, it's just I think useful to carry a device with you. It doesn't have to be your camera; it could be your phone, and have that curiosity. Or if you don't have anything like that, as you're walking through the room, with your eyes, looking around at things with different angles. Like, look up, look behind you, look beside you. When I have great light in front of me, especially like with landscape shots and everything, like at sundown and everything, I've made a habit of turning around and looking, well, what's that light hitting behind me? And I'm often really quite astonished how beautiful the light is behind me, and it's nice in front and everything, but what it illuminates can be also quite lovely.
Yeah. Also, if you're hiking, it never hurts to turn around and look because you
Yeah.
might be missing a vista behind you. You're dim, unless you come back the same loop and cache it. But
But when you are shooting flowers, I think mostly you have a plan how to do it. So when you start, you have a plan, I think.
yeah, I'll start out. What I like to do is in early morning when there's no wind because I do a lot of focus stacking. So I'll start looking for critters because little bugs. And like somebody was talking about my fly picture about how I got that to hold still. Well, I didn't. They just held still. I found one that was holding still. And in the cool mornings, they'll usually do that. So
Bees are lethargic when it's cool, so that's a good time to shoot them.
yeah, the problem with the lethargic bees, especially if they're not moving, they kind of collapse
Yeah.
and they just look like they're dead or something like that. But so, because I've done that with bees with like dewdrops on them, and so oh, that's going to be great, but it's just like as a dead bee.
But what I wanted to say that is if you have a plan, you mostly stick to the plan and you forget to look
Yeah,
around. So that's a mistake I make quite often. I don't forget to look around or
Yeah.
look up and down. Or when I'm in a place, I have a plan. I want to do it like this, and then I forget that maybe another position is better.
yeah. I like to tell people when you go somewhere like a landscape or something, let's say you're at the Grand Canyon and it's famous overlook, go ahead and take that shot, that postcard shot, just to get warmed up, and then allow yourself to stray from that. You got to get that one out of your system though before the other opportunities will make themselves known.
Yeah. But I think, again, I think one thing that I really value about what I try to do when I'm doing street photography, because I do a fair bit of that, is I really value just how you have to be quite alert and quickly responsive. And you're not always set right in terms of your focus or your shutter speed to catch things. But even when you're not, this it's kind of being kind of practiced in responding when something comes up in the instance is really valuable. I took a picture. I was walking around downtown Vancouver one day, and I looked up, and there was this window cleaner, about 4 stories up, and he was kind of suspended on some ropes and everything. And so I took a couple pictures, and I just started to turn, and just as I was turning, a seagull flew by him. And so I quickly whipped around and I got the shot, but my shutter speed was too slow to freeze the seagull, but it was still a reasonable shot, so I'm still happy with the shot. But like things like that, you won't happen unless you're just kind of somewhat close to where you want to be in terms of how your camera is set, but more to the point that you're looking to see. And that I think just that only happens over time, familiarity, and there is some intention there, but part of that intention might be just open to not be too planned. Just take pictures of whatever you see in front of you when they come up.
You learn from yourself when you
Yeah,
do things
exactly.
like that. This week I was photographing at the airport, and then there was a strike for the train. So there were a lot of people walking in and out, and I was walking in and out as well. But normally I only put my camera on manual. But when you are walking in and out, yeah, the light is different. You know that. So I started to put it on auto ISO because then you make less mistakes.
Yeah.
Right.
But you can see that the camera cannot handle it every time. For example, when you go in the dark Yeah, it's you have nice photos, but when you go outside and the light is so sunny, like 30 degrees with this, in the middle of the day, it has some problems with the auto ISO. So
Yeah.
actually, I started again to put it on manual. Just stopped it when I go outside. Stop it on, put it on manual, and uh, yeah, you change your shutter speed.
Yeah.
You know that with 500 and 5.6 it will work, but you need to have a good light.
Yeah. Or your camera meters off of a highlight and suddenly it throws itself completely out of whack in terms of the
Yeah,
ISO.
Yeah.
I've had that happen before.
that is, you can say that there are cameras, they are very good, but in cases like that, it's not working.
Yeah. And they only know that things are gray, right? That's all they understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
but
depends on what your spot is. Maybe the spot is gray or something. But yeah, if it's the idea is it averages out to middle gray.
yeah.
And that doesn't work. That's perks pretty well most of the time.
Yeah. But it is helpful to understand that.
Yep.
Right. Because then like I know I think you've talked several times around the zone system.
Yep.
You know, if you kind of understand the zone system in terms of the ability to potentially capture the broadest dynamic range possible by intentionally knowing where middle gray is in relation to the darks and the highlights in the scene, you're a step in front of your camera, and then you can use its settings to kind of lock in on that.
And actually now we can see our screen, eh? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
before there
The
was not
histogram.
possible. You have people that say, well, when they are on the street, just shoot and don't look at the screen. But I am one who every 10 photos I need to look
I do
because
too. Yeah. They call it chimping, like it's a bad thing. You're not supposed to look at. That's ridiculous.
yeah.
Because I don't know how many times I forgot and put the wrong setting on. I don't look. Oh, wait a minute. Why is this all black? Oh crap! I did this or that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to check my stuff.
And if you're on the street, the situations, the light is always different. Eh? When you will go in the street on the left side, there is sun, on the right side is shadow. So that cannot have good photos always.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah,
I
if
mean,
you auto ISO, you're not making too much mistakes, but
yeah.
don't like it because I want to think more than the camera does.
Yeah.
Auto ISO works really well. Like if you go my photography clubs, we have exhibits and stuff. So many of us will be taking photos of the people at the exhibit, and just to put it on auto ISO and let it rip. I'll also do rapid fire. So when you're getting somebody in a conversation, you can you can go around those awkward looking expressions and get a flattering expression to the people you're shooting. So I mean, we're not shooting film, so we can shoot as much as we want. And the auto ISO is great in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, I have drank the Kool-Aid a little bit about chimping but slightly because I totally agree with what you've said because I once shot at a friend's wedding and I had the ISO set to what was it or what was it set? I had the shutter speed set to 1/60th the whole time and I still managed to do fine. But it was like it could have been much better had I noticed that earlier. But I set my camera so that it doesn't show me the screen after I take a shot. So I have to choose to look at what I've taken a shot of, because I do find that if I'm checking shots all the time, it's taking me a little bit out of it. It distracts me. But I agree that, take a couple shots, check your exposure, make sure that you kind of know what you're getting. And then I'd be happy to not look at the screen again for quite a long time, because I kind of want to kind of trust that the settings I'm doing in the moment are going to be good. But it's a good idea to verify. But
Yeah.
I find I get too distracted if I keep looking at the screen, I do feel like a little bit like a chimp
Yeah,
because
I can imagine.
I
Yeah.
get kind of locked to that.
And sometimes you make mistakes as well. I mean, because sometimes I'm busy with ICM and then something else happened where I need for a faster shutter time.
Yeah.
I forget. So then I'm shooting, but I forget that it's ICM.
Well, something I just wanted to go back to when you were talking about shooting your seagull, Jeff, and when you said, oh, this you got this, you were shooting the window washer, and then there was a seagull. And this is a good way. I mean, no matter how you do go about it, you're doing something. And maybe it didn't work out, but that out of focus or the blurry seagull is going to be a passageway to something better.
Yeah.
You're going to learn more about what you do. Even if you have to throw away the image, you got mileage out of it, one way
Yeah.
or another.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
when
also
you,
going, oh, I'll probably not get this shot.
when you are
Yeah,
at
and-
home, when you are at home and you see your pictures and you are angry that you have nothing, you don't forget it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing though is kind of recognizing that, so in that very shot, one of the things that I like about it is that the washer kind of frozen still and everything else sharp, and then with an object flying through with blur introduces a blur element or like a motion element, and aesthetically that works.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think I would like it better frozen, but it also works showing the blur. The motion blur sometimes adds a dimension as well.
Yeah, actually, your mistakes makes your creativity better.
Yeah. It's the only way to grow.
And sometimes, even if you accidentally shoot the ground or something, the picture turns out okay as an abstract.
Yeah.
So I always take a look at those before I just automatically delete them, because a couple of times they come, hey, this is pretty cool. But with the chipping part, though, what I will do with focus stacking, I'll also use focus peaking.
Hmm.
So I'll use focus peaking to pull the lens back so I'm out in front of my subject. And I'll use focus peaking for that. And then when I get however many shots, I'll check the screen and see if the focus peaking is still like the little red dots or something on the leaf, because maybe I want that leaf to all be in focus. So then I'll just keep going with the focus stack if I see that.
Mhm.
So there's lots of information to be seen. Histogram, like you mentioned, to see this stuff, all the information on our screens will help us do better. Now I got a bunch of stuff. I already asked a question about how far you have to go. And when we're talking about in different countries, when you're different places like that, to me, if I'm somewhere in Europe or the Middle East or something like that, it's literally foreign, and everything is different. The whole world is different. All the stop signs look different. Everything looks different. So it's unique. Everything seems like a much more a target-rich environment for photography. To where I'm home, not so much. However, that shouldn't be that way. So I think that's where my point is that if you can unlock that freshness in your own hometown,
Hmm.
you will end up appreciating. You will get some good shots that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah,
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, if you are in a different culture, everything is new.
Yeah,
So if you're going outside of your hotel in the street, you can shoot everything. But the second day it's different. So if you make rounds around your hotel, this is not my story, but the story of another photographer, famous photographer, said the first 3 days I make rounds around my hotel. This was a man he studied culture. And he made every day he makes bigger rounds.
Hmm.
After 3 days, he get a little, how you say,
Yeah.
accustomed as at the environment, and then he starts shooting. So the first 3 days, when he had taken pictures, he had maybe 10,000 pictures. The first 10,000, they are not pictures because they are only in his head. Then he starts shooting.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
because everything looks very new to you and everything looks nice.
Yeah.
But for the people who are living there, everything is normal.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, consciously in the last few years. So, my family, we went for a trip to Japan, and so I was there for a couple weeks, and for part of that, my wife went and did a walking tour. My son and I basically hung out in Tokyo for 12 days, just every day walking out and taking pictures and such. And what was, Japan is wonderful to visit, absolutely wonderful. It's one of my favorite places. But what was really wonderful is like you walk out, everything's new. You get on a train, you zoom across to this other place, a whole new neighborhood, everything's different. And so it was just absolutely positive in so many ways. And then photographically, it was just a wonderful experience. I had so much fun. But when I came back to Vancouver, I realized, well, I can travel through my city in a similar way. And I've talked before how I do that. So I'll hop on a scooter, go to another neighborhood. I'll hop on the transit buses, trains, and boats here in Vancouver. And I purposely treat my own city as if I'm a tourist. And I find that has incentivized me to take different kinds of pictures that aren't so different than when I travel. So I've tried to bring that same spirit of looking for both the familiar and the unfamiliar, but I purposely I try to really work the city I live in, and I live in a pretty interesting city in terms of all the different neighborhoods, and it's easy to get to pretty spectacular nature and things like that too. But I think you can do that in a lot of places. It might be small, a bit harder in a smaller town to find the difference in the interest, but like I seek out events. So when there are street festivals or other kinds of things happening, or I purposely go into busy parts of downtown at times, I know there'll be lots of people there. And then I repeat that, and I find it is fun. There's a lot to find and explore. And then if I've got a camera with me, which I always do, it gives me lots of opportunities to push myself in terms of taking pictures in different environments and circumstances.
They
Yeah.
say that, and that's true for me as well, that it's very difficult to make photos in your own street
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's so famous to you. You know every corner, but the light is always different. So this
Yeah.
is this is something you can use as a
Yeah.
photographer.
Well, do you remember some months ago I submitted a couple of photos from a fire
Yeah.
to that was a block away from me. That's in my neighborhood, right? And so, again, your where you live has stuff happening around you, and that include like I can't tell you how many times I've run into photographers walking in alleys. We can walk around in the alleys
Oh, alleys are great. Yeah.
yeah, because you see things that you won't otherwise see, and you look at buildings from behind, and you kind of see, like kind of seeking out the kind of places behind a fence, or a
Yeah,
little bit out of the way. Down by a port is always an interesting
but you
place.
need to be open to change. You are
Yeah,
more changeable because uh, you say you make photos in the evening and the night as well. So who goes with his camera on in the night? When other one is sleeping, you are making photos.
I try to. Yeah, there's a music venue that's in a boxing gym in a very sketchy part of town here in Vancouver. I showed you a picture there, but you're in a pretty crazy alley right by a very depressed part of the city, and there's amazing graffiti and the light and everything there. The architecture there is all beautiful, and it's interesting in the day. It's differently interesting in the evening and at night. So if you can find comfort and you feel that you can venture into those spaces, you'll bring back something, I think, new, or maybe something that's challenging for how you're going. But you want to make sure you feel safe and confident being able to do it.
So actually, it's the conclusion is that you have to look different, but how you look different, and that's the key thing for everything.
Yeah.
If you look different, then it's quite easy to do. So a while ago, somebody asked me which kind of camera I need to buy. I don't have experience, and I told him maybe when you have a mobile, just start looking with your mobile, only looking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the experience I have of in my I don't know if my pictures are good, but I I make a lot of pictures all my life. So this is more experience if I compare it to the one who asked me his advice. So this the looking is half the part of photographing.
Yeah. Well, that old saying, the best camera is the one that you carry with you. It's absolutely true. So the best camera for a new person who's kind of seeking out, if it isn't their phone, is this one that they feel comfortable having with them and taking out and taking pictures.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter what it is otherwise.
But they, in a way, they are looking up at photographers. I don't know. Because they think that you have a magical machine.
Mhm.
It is a magical machine.
But it's only a box.
You
It's
can
a box
freeze
with
time.
nothing.
Yeah.
They have a box with the chips. There's no more, is it?
Yeah.
Well, there's a famous story. You know who Louis Agassiz is? Biologist. Back in the 1800s, he had a graduate student. He was forced to examine a sunfish, a dead sunfish, over and over again. It kept telling him to do it more and more. And the graduate student was getting more angry at Agassiz and say, "Why are you having me do this?" He said, "No, just keep doing it." So he decided to put himself into 10 hours a day for 2 weeks to study this sunfish. And the next thing he knew, he discovered all this stuff about this just because he was forced to do it.
hmm
And it was remarkable to himself. And then I guess he was really surprised with all the information, just new information this kid got from this biological experiment. And I think that can happen with you. I mean, part of that is because you're actually working, you're taking pictures, you're moving around, you're not just wondering about, I wonder if this picture will be good. Maybe you actually get to do the work.
No, you are thinking about the light. You're thinking about the wind. You're thinking
Yeah.
about how this flower is growing. You're thinking about the species that look like this. Or you look at other photographers who make photos of flowers as well, with
Yeah.
in other manner. So it's not only taking a picture.
Yeah.
That was what we were talking about, the foreign scenes. Let's see. We also were talking about looking for inspiration. I mean, there was a famous Picasso quote. I think it was Picasso said he finds inspiration through work. You can sit there and look for information all you want, but that's where you'll find inspiration is if you're working. Of course, in his case, he's painting, but I think that's the same is true, particularly for photographers. You'll get more inspiration by actually picking up your camera and start shooting than wondering about what you're going to shoot next.
Yeah, but I don't have it often, but there are people who say that photographers has sometimes they have a photographic dip. Yeah, you understand dip? That they are down,
Oh yeah,
they don't want to make photos because
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
they have
A slump.
yeah. I don't have it often, but there are people who have that often, and yeah, he don't make pictures because he is now down.
Yeah, I think that's well. I was an avid bicyclist, and sometimes you wouldn't want to go. Oh man, I don't know. I don't want to go. And because I would go out and do at least 20 miles a day, oftentimes 40 miles a day. And but what I would do is I would do the routine stuff. I would put on my bicycling clothes. I would get my bicycle pump out and pump up my tires and get it all ready to go. And then I had some inertia. The next thing I know, I was down the road on the bike. So,
But when you don't have the mood to go, you go, or how do you do that?
well, I was very much, my desire was to ride every day, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I don't feel like it this day." I think, no, because that was part of the exercise routine and everything else. I want to be consistent with it. But that worked for me was just to do the donkey work, like just put on the clothes, get the bicycle pump out and pump it up. I think the same thing is true with photography. Get your camera out, make sure the battery's charged. You got the right lens, make sure your memory cards are ready to go, and start moving toward working. And the next you'll build up some inertia.
There are people who have excuses when it's raining, eh?
Yeah.
When it's raining, I just grab a different camera that is pretty much impervious to rain.
Yeah. Or at least you can start doing post-processing too if it's raining too much.
It's actually wonderful. I highly recommend people go out and shoot in the rain.
Oh yeah.
because yeah, so the rain generally because of or just after in terms of droplets on everything, but during the rain you get this incredible dynamic of the rain hitting surfaces and bouncing, which is endlessly fascinating, and then throw reflections in the dark with lights into the rain, and the world is really fascinating. So yeah, get out there in bad weather and shoot.
Well, I've been
I
wanting to
know
do.
one photographer who says, I don't go to the beach because the sand is very bad for my camera.
Yeah, that's true, but get a camera or be careful of your camera or have a camera that's well sealed and don't worry about it. Or use your phone.
Well, I was just on the verge of saying something about that. Oh, anyway, we were talking about. Oh yeah, with the rain, with the bad weather. This is something that I've been wanting to do, and I've been scoping out places where I could park my car during a heavy downpour and have an intersection with cars pulling up to a stoplight, for example, and setting my camera up with long exposures or whatever, and just trying to see what it looks like with the taillights and headlights and the motions and things like that.
Hmm.
Just out to, and even, maybe even a rainy window, with rain pouring over that, just to come up with these abstract images. I
Yeah.
can't help but think that would work.
Oh, it'd work well. And the other part that would, if I'm understanding your shot, a long exposure with intense rain, you'll see how much movement is when the rain's bouncing off of surfaces.
Yeah,
So if you have anything at ground level, you'll see the rain hit and then go up. So you have all these lines all over the place.
exactly. You get that with rapids too in a stream because you get specular highlights from the splashes.
Yeah.
And always really fun little firework type streaks. So, something a little more technical. What do you think about the aspect, like the ratio of your dimensions of an image? I mean, how much thought do you put into that?
That's a good question. I mean, I've noted folks, well, if you keep it to one exposure, starting there, as opposed to panoramas, because we have so much latitude now to do more cinematographic and multiple shots stitched together. But if we stick to a single exposure, um, I am finding that for certain kinds of shots, I pull towards a 16:9 aspect ratio.
Yeah,
And another thing to say is that I'm probably, and this isn't necessarily a good thing, because of the so many of the images that I'm sharing on screens. I'm more likely to shoot in a landscape than portrait because it makes for a larger image. So I have to be thoughtful about that because sometimes it'd be far better to shoot a portrait format. But with 16:9, what I often like, especially like I'm got a picture on my screen right now with a flower, a big blossom in one half of it, and then out of focus aspects in the rest. And I sometimes like to have that as a slice rather than in a 4:3 or 4:3 ratio, and it just depends a lot on the image. But I find that I'm happiest if I've made the choice of what I think I'm going to be doing in the camera, as opposed to in post. And sometimes when I'm cropping, including with aspect ratio in post, it's because what I framed in the camera maybe wasn't as effective as I had hoped it would be.
I don't think too much about it. Yeah, when, for example, I've edited my picture, and it's a little bit more than a square, then I make it a square.
Mm, yeah,
But
that
but
makes sense.
but and if it's a three-quarter of a picture, I'm thinking as well about the format. But nowadays I'm working in a series, and then it's different. Everything need to be, in my opinion, to be the same.
Yeah.
And I don't like when I'm shooting, I do everything in landscape, not portrait and landscape, because you're making series. Then you're breaking something in the series. So therefore, when with series, I do everything with three against four, 3:4.
Hmm. 3, 4, yeah.
yeah, I'm kind of torn. I love panoramas in general. I'm drawn to them, but also I think it helps oftentimes to help if you get stuck with a particular scene, even a panorama, flip the camera vertical and see if you can discover something. Maybe that you're just not looking at it in the right way. Like you're looking at it vertically might open that up. And I think the vertical panoramas, like landscape, not so much, you can't really say vertical panorama, but vertical landscapes can be much more intimate. So you can zero in on landscapes and pieces of a landscape. And
Yeah.
oftentimes you could get maybe it's a boring landscape, but if you crop it down to 3 or 4 sections, you can have 3 or 4 much better photos.
Mhm.
Just as a tool of an exercise, just another way to thinking about things.
Yeah.
And sometimes for example, when I'm shooting shadows, sometimes I'm flipping the shot.
Yeah,
But
that's always
that's
one of my favorite.
not a format difference, but so only flipping because it's more weird.
Yeah, if you
And
don't have any
reflections too. You can do from time to time. I've flipped reflections, and especially if it's a really big reflection, and I can fool people into thinking that what they're looking at is the real thing as opposed to the reflected surface. I like doing that, but you have to get it right, or else it just is gimmicky. And then the other thing with reflections is not just flipping it in terms of the presentation, but like flipping it backwards so that the text looks right as opposed to in a reflected text.
Yeah.
And those kinds of effects, I think they're working just because they are making something a little bit wrong. There's something just not quite right, and that draws people in to look a little bit harder. So those kinds of things are fun to play with.
Yeah, everybody makes photos realistic, and then when you do something different, they need to think more.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there are no clear orientation cues as to what's up and down. That's a candidate for flipping just to see how it works
Yeah.
out.
Exactly. Well, and it is interesting though, because I think it's fair game that, people may or may not decide to kind of go along with you. If you don't give them the visual reference, they'll insist it should be there. Like my Canada geese intentional camera motion was subject to that, where people said, well, bird photos need to be sharp. I want to see the details here. And
Yeah,
well, yeah, I could do that, but I didn't want to do that.
but you weren't shooting a bird photo. You're shooting a
Oh.
bird in motion, man. You're
Yeah.
applying energy
Yeah.
to it.
So, it's all fair because, we've talked before about how some of the decisions you make in your composition are ones that will lead your viewers to see a thing, or you just like it for whatever reason, and that's how you've laid it out. And then it encounters a person looking at it and saying, I like, I don't like, I'm confused, therefore whatever. So it's this kind of the transaction that we have when you put something out there for people to look.
It's funny to let people guess what you have done, or to
Yeah.
let people guess what's behind it, or maybe a piece of hand, or don't have a face in the picture, or things like that.
The faces that once you can't unsee those. After that, you're going, oh, it's a picture of that face, which is
Yeah.
fine. And also I do some architecture photography, and if you don't have up and down cues, you can flip the stuff over, and it will give you an aspect. Because usually I'm shooting up from the ground. If you flip it upside down, it's like you're shooting from the sky. So people are going to get that feeling like you're shooting from above.
Yeah.
But that works pretty well sometimes. But you definitely can't have any cues that shows something's right, like somebody walking or whatever.
Actually, I've done a lot of ICM, and now half a year I did it. So last year, half a year only ICM, but now
Wow.
I use it in my pictures. Sometimes when I'm shooting, I think, oh, let's make it ICM then, and then mostly it's working because I have experience now. You first need to have experience before you can use it.
When I think having an appreciation for when it's going to really give you a strong subject as well, because there are times when I think it works really well, and other times when it maybe doesn't lend itself. But
Hey,
again,
Fernando,
hey,
you're living.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So you got a D850 in the background.
Huh?
So yeah, D850 Nikon D850 box in your background.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have that. That is my camera, my top of the line right now. I also have two D800s and some Nikon film cameras, but I'm a Nikon guy.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Me too. D850.
D850, yeah. I like the Z series, and I've been thinking about it because they're, especially now, they've been so discounted. You can get it. The ZF is a great camera for under $2,000. I love the Z9. The Z8 is now better than the Z9 for a while.
But I heard that it's heavy.
The Z9
It
is
is,
heavy because I have a Z9. I graduated from a D850 to a Z9.
but it's not much more heavy. It's just a little heavier, but not a lot. To me, at least. Um, I have a friend who has both of them, and I had the opportunity to play with them, and I like them. It's just too much money for me right now, and so I'm kind of waiting for the next release because
Yeah.
it's already like 4 or 5 years old. So I imagine that later this year or next year they're gonna come up with something, and maybe then. But I don't know really. I'm always like the D850 is a great camera, and all the emphasis on these new Z cameras is done on the video side of things that I don't really care about,
No,
and
I never use it as well.
the autofocus is better in many ways, but it's also different. So there's the way I use the autofocus on my D850, I cannot replicate on the Z9, for example. They rely more on face detection and subject recognition for subject tracking. So, and then the camera decides what should be in focus. You don't have as much granular control, and so I don't know. But but the main thing to me is that if you're gonna go that route, then you need to start buying lenses again because you need to start getting all the Z lenses, and
Yeah.
the adapter works, but it is a little bit slower, and it also gets bulkier because it makes the lens longer. So
Well, I think the
it's a
adapter.
trade-off. It's a different thing.
Yeah, I had my Nikkor 105 micro that was on
Right.
my was it ED for my D850. Super sharp lens. When I put that on my Z9, it was less sharp. So I traded that in and got the Z version. Bang! It's actually sharper than the original, but it was so much sharper. I'm very happy with the sharpness of that lens now and that body combination. But I would highly recommend whatever you're going to get next. And if you're going to wait another couple of years, probably be the only thing you're going to be able to get is a mirrorless camera in general, as opposed to a DSLR.
Right.
Because
So-
I love the mirrorless. I've been shooting.
So a counter view. Here's the latest camera that
Okay.
I bought. This
Oh yeah,
is a
that.
1951 Barnack. It's got
Wow.
a 50 millimeter lens on it, 3.5, I think. It's or two. Oh no, it's a Summicron. It's an f2. But it's a very and it's got a teeny tiny little view in, and then you look to the right of that, and you can figure out the focus patch. So I don't think that's phase focusing. I think it's just luck of the draw focusing. But here's the Nikkor lens that works with it. That's a 35 millimeter.
Nice.
Well,
It's like, but I have looked at the Nikon ZF as a possibility to dismount some of my Leica lenses onto it because I just to make it easier on my eyes for some things. But I'm not interested in video at all. But it is kind of fun to shoot with these older cameras as well.
Yeah, the ZF it's a good buy. It's
Mhm.
it's definitely a hit. The Jeff, I was reading just a few minutes ago. What is the latest product of Leica they just came out with?
I'm not sure the latest. They have the Q line, so the Q3, which has a 43 millimeter. They also have the SL series, so the SL3, and so the SL body is something maybe like again it's a mirrorless, and so it'd be something like what you're talking about in terms of the Z bodies. But is there
It
something
is
that I'm
it is something that you will definitely will be able and love to use on that camera you
Isn't
just
there a
showed
new
me.
film, Leica?
Oh, the film. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's rebranded. It's someone else's. So yeah, yeah, so I
It's a
saw that.
50 ISO 50 black and white film, and I think it's great.
Well, with I have an M9 and I can shoot at ISO 80.
Right.
And it's actually kind of interesting, especially shooting flowers with that and everything. There is something nice about shooting that with that really slow ISO sometimes, in terms of the results that you get. But no, to Teddy's point, I do think like the mirrorless cameras are wonderful because you have so many options. So in my M10, I can mount pretty much any lens imaginable. So I can mount old Canon lenses, old Nikon lenses, old Pentax lenses, what have you. And it's lovely to explore that. I mean, I like old lenses, so I'm kind of prone to go that way more than to more modern lenses. But it's just wonderful to have that variety.
It also has like the face detection or subject detection works with full manual lenses.
Well, there's an
So
adapter I've heard that you can
so
use that will do that.
well,
Yeah.
you use the adapter for the mount, so you can mount Leica or whatever brand lens you want. And the lens is manual, so there's no autofocus. So you're still focusing with the ring on the lens, but the detectors on the viewfinder will get green when
Yeah.
the face of the subject is in focus. So that helps a lot. It's almost like an autofocus. It's not auto, but
Yeah.
it
Pentax had
it is
that
great.
feature for a long time where you could mount a manual lens to it and you could press a green button on the back and it would basically allow you to get a focus confirmation off of the lens. And so I use that with old Takumar lenses and such on my
Nice.
Pentax body. So that's a nice feature.
And it has that little lever that you switch it to black and white mode, and then you shoot in black and white straight out of the camera. It's great.
A question. You're talking about focus. I was thinking in my cameras, I can put in the Nikon, you can say focus point. Focus point, how you say it, save it or something, save your focus point, yes. Can you check that in the software where the focus point is?
You were asking about how to do that? Is that
Yeah.
right? Well, first of all, once you get into that Nikon, the menus, I mean, that's a lot of stuff in the menus to try to figure out. I've never done that. It should be pretty easy to find a YouTube video on it. Generally, I just have one tiny focus point that I can move around with the joystick in the back, and I'll do back button focusing for that.
Yeah, I do it as well.
So
But
yeah, and I've seen on other cameras where you can load, let's say, a certain kind of focus approach as a profile. So let's
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
if you're moving from street photography to bird photography, you can tell it to use a different range of sensors. On the Pentax K33, you can do that. So I'm absolutely confident that the Nikon would have probably even more capacity in that regard. But it would be a profile that you would load in to basically select one kind of focus approach or exposure approach over another.
Before I didn't have how you say, a camera with with mirror, and then you could say they saved your focus point, and then in the software you could say that that's in the left point of the screen there's a focus point. But now I don't know how it works. So
There is another approach again for birding photographers where if the focus loses its subject, you can tell the camera to kind of reset to a neutral zone or to stay at its last point of focus or to wait a certain, like, so you're trying to give yourself a chance to regain focus as opposed to the camera hunting. So those are
Yeah.
options that I've seen in settings before too.
I've heard that Nikon is not so good with focusing. Like I don't know if it's true, but
I've had pretty good luck with mine. I mean, with macro photography with my macro lens, there's a little switch on the side of the lens, so it won't be searching for things in focus in the distance. So
Right.
if I'm trying to get a bug or something like that, and all of a sudden it's going to focus on that tree in the background, it will avoid that. So that's super handy.
Yeah, I've seen those controls in the lenses.
Yeah.
My big Sigma zoom lens has that also. They restrict the focus range, so the lens doesn't go hunting.
Yeah.
Like crazy.
Because I'll be up close to bees sometimes, and they're shooting up at the sky, and that goes all of a sudden, boom, it's all out of focus, and I got to find the bee again. Blah. But that prevents that.
This is the last Nikon I ever shot with. It's Coolpix 995.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember that.
yeah. This was a great little camera, and I love the body type where you had this little swivel thing.
Yeah.
It was really quite an innovative way.
Yeah, that was a big step up from the Casios and stuff like that. They were
Yeah,
actually doing some real.
with a camera like that, you can play that you don't know how to photograph. People are looking at you and they think,
Well,
like,
yeah, they don't know. Yeah, they kind of don't, like, you can go above and then shoot down like
they think
this.
you're
and-
crazy.
yeah, it was a precursor to the tilt screen. The whole body tilted.
Yeah.
Okay, we were
You
going
get
through
6
some
megapixels.
topics before we left. I'm not going to go through all the topics we had, but let's go on to another one. How often do you use tripods?
As
Well,
often as I want to carry them.
Yeah. So, having been admonished a number of times by members of Weekly, I have started to try tripods a little bit more. But even yesterday, I went out and so I take sharper, better pictures with a tripod. No question. It's just physics. But I take different pictures with a tripod because it takes more time to set up, and I take fewer pictures, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But yesterday I went out because I sometimes need just a bit more stability, maybe not tripod stability. So I have this Wemberley kind of
Right.
gimbal, half gimbal, and with a little L bracket, I can have a little bit more stability, but have the portability that I want. So I would never use a tripod for street photography because that's just
No.
weird. But I would certainly, I'm starting to use a little bit more when I'm doing macro of flowers and things like that. And if I'm trying to do night skies or other things.
And when you go, if you do wildlife, or if you go to a zoo, for example, you can use that. I have the same gimbal, mono gimbal, they call it.
Yeah.
You mount it on a monopod, and then you can hook the monopod to your belt, and then you're supporting the camera from the lens. If you're using a big lens, you're supporting the camera from the lens with the monopod from your waist, and then the camera is just floating in front of your face, and it makes it super stable and super
Oh, that's
easy.
interesting.
So you don't need a
Is there a
tripod.
bracket? Is there a
Right.
device you attach to your belt?
Yeah, I just stuck it with my
turn it
in my belt here.
Okay. Yeah.
This is elastic, so this wouldn't work. But you just stick it there. Let me.
Yeah, it looks like it could be approaching a disaster if you're not careful with that, though.
This is I have a smaller monopod than this, but kind of do that.
Yeah. Use your body
And then
as
you're walking with your
as
camera
other
right
legs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can still pull it out and extend it and put it on the floor, but it makes it super.
Yeah, steady.
It's a little treat that works.
I'll have to keep that in mind. I've got a smaller, I got an old Bogan from the 1970s monopod that might work really well for that.
The other trick I
And with a
find,
tripod, I have done. So you can put one leg of the tripod like I showed with a monopod, and the other two legs over your
Oh.
shoulders,
Yeah.
and mount the camera there, and that is also super stable, super stable.
People are going to look at you like you're nuts, though.
that is true. I was going to say, don't do that in a street
A
situation.
bit weird, but
The other trick I do is I put the camera down. I put it on a shelf or like on a wall. I put it on a surface. And if you're worried about your camera, you can get those little beanbag things that are attached underneath, but put the camera down.
Yep.
The bean bags work pretty well, especially for on cruises. When I've been on some cruises, and people will have these long lenses on a bean bag on the rail of the ship. They're getting great shots with no tripod, and they're very flexible, Now with the tripod, and you're using an L bracket, which I use an L bracket all the time, as opposed to having to take the tripod and flip it over on its side, with a ball head or something like that. So yeah, I've got an advantage to the L bracket to me is I can hold my camera like this. It's a great way to stay stable. So
that's a big camera. Oh my gosh.
That's a Z9 now. It's heavy. And if you're shooting bees with flash on one hand, man, that elbow. But L brackets, I swear by L brackets.
mm-hmm.
And also when you do use a tripod, what kind of head do you use?
I was going to show you. This is a Pro Media Gear head.
Yeah.
It's also like a gimbal head, so you can mount
Nice.
your lens from the side. You can use it like a regular ball head, but the rotation is like 90 degrees rotated. So for big and heavy lenses, it's great. From here, you have full rotation, up and down.
Is that Arca Swiss mount?
Yes.
One thing I've been finding, and this maybe comes from I do a fair bit of stuff with telescopes, but like gimbals, since we're all throwing gear up in front of the camera. But using a gimbal head for a lot of this stuff I really like, because the first thing you do with the gimbal is you balance your lens. So with your camera, if you've got your camera with it can be whatever size lens, and if you've got a collar on your lens, you basically don't even have to tension down. You point the camera to where you want it. It should stay there with a tiny bit of tension because it's balanced. And then that makes it, that's why it's so good for moving objects if you're tracking, but it's also good for things that are stationary. If you're not needing to lock down the camera because of wind or vibration or other things, but having a really easy way to just have it perfectly balanced in a gimbal setup is lovely, and it's less fatiguing to shoot with because you're not having to support the weight of the lens on the monopod or tripods doing that work.
With your particular gimbal too, you can set the nodal point. So you can move it so that nodal point in your lens is going to be right where it pivots on. Which I used to worry about that all the time, but I never really have any problems with any merging. In stitching.
That is only for close-up subjects. That
the big
if you're shooting a landscape, like a panorama, that everything is far away, the nodal point will not be a problem. But if you want to incorporate flowers in the foreground, for example, then those flowers close to the lens, from shoot to shoot, they're going to move a lot, and you're not going to be able to create the stitch unless you have the camera properly aligned.
Yeah, for flowers, I'll use one of these things.
Right.
It's actually a focusing rail, but I'll just move the lens.
Right.
As I go along. The big time landscape photographers, they're really particular about it to make sure the nodal point is right. And I was on the verge of buying a $600 gimbal for that until I figured out you can just do that handheld. I mean, I have excellent results
But
without
they
that.
don't use, yeah, but they don't use gimbals for that. They use a panoramic. It looks similar to what you showed me. It's just
Yeah.
strictly for panoramas to adjust the nodal point, and it's just for that. The gimbal is more for what Jeff was describing, just to balance the lens so you can float your camera and track a bird flying or animals
Yeah.
moving around or sports.
And when you also have, oh shoot, what was that? Something on my list here. I'm losing it. Okay, now I use a three-way head instead of
Okay.
a ball head,
Okay,
and I
yeah,
find it's very precise
right.
moving, and especially when you couple it with this thing. And I'll do stereo photography, so when I get everything level, and I can shoot so that the camera is from the left is pointed toward the subject instead of side by side. If it's pointed, you get very good stereo photographs. So you can be very, very precise as where everything is.
Hmm.
Move it just a little bit with a little knurled knob to the left or the right or up and down. It's a whole lot better than the ball head. Because the ball head, you got to loosen that thing and
Yeah,
Wow.
that's true. Yeah.
Well, in essence, I
Okay.
use the gimbal in the same way in this case because it's got 3 points of adjustment,
oh yeah,
but it's very stable and you don't have like with the ball. What I don't like about the ball head is the minute you loosen it, you suddenly are responsible for the camera weight. Whereas with the gimbal, it's at 0 point, it's already very stable, and so you're just moving from one stable point to another. But it's bigger. So I've been thinking about something smaller. So that's why I really like this little Wemberley 45 because it works really like I love it on the monopod because I can be stable and still have a lot of additional stability than otherwise would be the
I'm
case.
definitely gonna look at that with the monotop because sometimes I just can't get out with the tripod. Now, when I was in a Golden Gate Bridge and I had the security guy come up and said, "No, you can't use tripods on Golden Gate Bridge." But then he pulled away and backed up and says, "Just squeeze the legs together and use it as a monopod." So hey, and if you just take the legs out just a little bit, it's still a tripod. There you go.
This is what you want, Teddy.
Oh yeah.
Haven't touched this thing in so long.
And bellows, yeah. A lot of people do that macro photography. They used to take lenses and reverse them for macro
Yeah, but
photography.
for your focus stacking,
Yeah.
you put a 50 in reverse here. You have the reverse ring,
Mhm.
and then you have full control of to move it along.
Yeah.
And for focus stacking, what you're doing for photographing bags or the flowers and all of that is great.
Yeah, and if you get a regular macro, for instance, I've got an Aloha wide angle macro here, and if this thing here it's wide angle, so and you almost cannot get it fine enough to make this work with focus stacking, which I was disappointed with that.
What's
But
the
it's a great
the
lens.
focal range on that, Teddy?
This is a 14 millimeter.
Oh wow, that'd be
It's all
interesting.
manual, and it's not
14, full
14.
frame.
Yeah, it's full frame. Is it 14 or 15? Maybe it's 15. 15 millimeter.
15. Nice.
Yeah, I'm getting mixed up with I have a 24 to 14 Nikon.
Right.
But this is a I mean, you can get so close to this, you can be touching the lens and it's still in focus.
Right, because that is
Wow.
macro. Yeah.
Yeah.
I shoot a fair with like a 28 millimeter macro that on the Q2 you can flip a ring and it's suddenly a macro distance.
Yeah.
So you have about a 3-inch working range, and then you can put a filter on top to have that again. But it's really interesting shooting wide angle macros. It's a very different
Oh yeah.
kind of aspect for
Then a lot more background. Yeah.
yeah. It's lovely how flexible and convenient it is just to turn a dial and boom, you're in a macro range.
Yeah, and it's
Well,
fussy to use that. Also, you got to watch. You're not always constantly the shadow. You're not getting a
Yeah, you
shadow
have
of
to
the
have
lens
light.
on everything.
Yeah.
with a wide angle macro, if you're photographing a bag, with a regular macro, you're describing the bag. With a wide angle macro, you're telling a story all of a sudden.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's the whole thing with the punctum and studium, the Roland Barthes thing. So where was I?
So Teddy, I
yeah.
have a couple. Well, one topic I wanted to mention because it's you guys have been writing about it in Weekly a couple weeks ago, and the restriction on the image sizes in Flickr and how to circumvent that. And the I understand your argument, and it's a very valid argument to get the higher resolution version so you can properly judge the image. But we need to be careful when we start looking at the ways to hack into the original. You're kind of circumventing not just the Flickr restriction, but also the owner wishes to make the original available for download or not.
Well, that's sort of the barn door's been open on that for a long time. Because all you got
Well,
easy to do
yes.
that. Yeah.
Right, but I was gonna comment in the thread, and then I decided not to because I don't want to scare people away and open Pandora's box, and I also don't want to provide a way to access the original and violate copyright, basically, right?
Mhm.
If
So-
somebody tells me not to download their stuff, hey, I won't. So far, everybody I've ever done that with, they're really happy to do it. They'll say, "Yeah, sure, let me
Well,
show you."
what happens is some people would upload a 6,000 pixels image, for example, very large image, and make it available for download, and they're okay with that. Others will upload that high resolution, but they only allow downloads up to 2048,
Yeah, 2000.
and that is and now Flickr put that restriction to 1080 for non-paying subscribers,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know. There is some gray area there that yes, oh no, I have images stolen from Flickr. There was a few years ago I freaked out and I removed all of my images because I lost like 3 or 4 images were published of my images were stolen and published. One of my infrared forest images, there's some guy in England that is selling them on
Oh man.
selling prints of that. And it is well known that there are lots of ways. If you use Chrome, you're going to find plugins that allow you to download the original, regardless of restrictions and limitations. I don't want to make that information public on Flickr because on the group, because we have people from everywhere visiting, not just us friends, and then it's kind of we're telling the
story.
teaching people how to steal our own images.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, I wouldn't want to do that. So we need to be careful, I think, there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although I think that in my case, I literally, it's that small of an image. I mean, you're talking about, it's not much more than a thumbnail, and that's not
And you're
reasonable
right.
for
And
review.
you're right. And I think just ignore that image and move on to the
That's
next.
what I'm going to have
And-
to do. Even though I hate to
Right.
do that, I think it's unfortunate that Flickr did that to the non-paying customer.
And maybe we can leave your comment on an image might be, unfortunately, the image is too small for me to judge it. Submit a higher resolution if you want my feedback on your image, and
Yeah.
that's it, you know.
But if
And
you-
then the member will choose, is like, okay, if I want to receive feedback, then I need to
although it is super easy for anybody, even if you don't have any web experience, to download the images. You just right
Actually-
click and page source and look at the list of images.
Yeah.
And there they are.
What-
Now
One thing-
I think Flickr's got that blocked out though. I think that's only available to download the large size photos if you're the actual person who uploaded it.
So
I'll look at the
what
code
you're
and I can
saying,
see where the stuff has been removed.
so what you're saying, that will only show you links to the maximum size that you allow viewers to access of the maximum size of your images that you allow viewers to see, and you control that on your settings on your Flickr account. You can define that.
You can
say,
define
okay,
that. However, if you define that in your
but,
Flickr account,
but
the
your
picture will still be
original can be much larger.
Yeah.
But if your original is larger, you know, at the top where it says download original version,
Mhm, yep.
if you're not making the original available, it's gonna say download large version 2048 or
Right.
bigger, whatever the user. So that is the limit that the user decides, okay, I'm going to make my images available up to this size for everybody to grab. And that's,
But
I
it's
think that
only-
should be respected.
That's only when
Uh,
you are a paid member, I think. If you are,
No,
you are
well, so correct. So when you're a paying member, you have that control. If you're a non-paying member, Flickr will put a limit at 1080 right now. So everything above 1080 is gonna show grayed out. So
but now
so
it's,
it may go to 2048, but it's gonna be grayed out.
Yeah. It's
And
what's
then the
different.
original could be 6,000 pixels. or
What's different is the user used to be able to say, I don't want anybody to be able to download the images. However, if you go in to look at the page source, you see the HTML code, you can see all the image file URLs. However, the way Flickr's got it arranged, those attributes that are on the web page, those are gone. I mean, you can see
Right.
that the name of the size names are there, but the part where the URL was is gone. So they've got that doctored up. You literally can't download the stuff now.
so actually,
Other than the 1/1056.
so actually, when I am not a paid member, and when I post one with 6,000, they only can use it with 2048 or now maybe
Right.
2000. But actually, Teddy knows a way to get it out with 6,000, I think, or not.
I was trying to, but I wouldn't. It did early on. It was May 15th is when this started. So I think they were gradually rolling out more stuff. And it looks to me like on your stuff, I can still download the 2048. Most users, the largest you can download is 1046 or 1056. And and 2048 is my bare minimum for being able to do that. But your 1056 is like half that size.
Yeah, that's
So-
difficult. I think.
Yeah.
It's already difficult.
But I'm not sure why you're not a paid member, but still I'm able to download 2048.
Yeah.
And I think I've even downloaded larger ones from you. Maybe it's because it might be dependent on how early on you've signed up for Flickr.
Maybe they have a range in it as well. Yeah.
So part of that is the user settings. So I'm just looking at my settings, and so I've changed this over the years. So if I were to change this, let's say to people I follow or any Flickr member, then would they have access to the larger files now?
That's a non-paying member. I don't know.
I haven't looked at the settings in a while, but I remember that on the settings, there is a place where you can say, okay, maximum size allowed for download, and you can say large 2048 or extra large or something like that.
Yeah. Flickr says this on their website, so I don't think anything that we're doing here is necessarily news. Anyone who knows anything about a browser knows that, you can get around it if you know where the source files are. And as you said, that you can find it in the source.
But the source of the ones that are the 1056, those image URLs are just gone. I would bet that the source file from the person who uploaded the stuff, you would still see those HTTP paths.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can see there are attributes like image source, boom, and then you have like quotation marks and you have the URL. Boom, that's gone. And when I download the source file now.
You can't hack it anymore, Teddy.
Oh,
But yeah, you're right. It is difficult to judge about a photo with 1,000 pixels.
Yeah.
I think it's not fair to the people who run Flickr to do that. I think I'm gonna send them a politely worded email telling them how we judge photos here, and this is messing that up for many people.
You didn't get the answer, I think.
No, I haven't done it yet. I'm going to do that. I'll wait and.
I think, unfortunately, we're old-fashioned, and we're still thinking of this in the wrong way. I think that technology keeps getting better and better, and now pretty much a lot of people have 4K, 5K monitors. In a couple of years, everybody's going to have an 8K monitor.
Even worse.
And or bigger, because in 5 years or 10 years, who knows what's going to be available.
Well, I think there's
So
another
super resolution is coming, and if we don't provide a larger image, all people are going to be able to see is a thumbnail of what we have. And
Yeah.
So we need to let go of that idea of not providing the high resolution version of our images. I think the protection needs to come from copyright. Maybe, Flickr has this company Pixie that they will search the way to match your images. If they find your photo somewhere else, they give you a warning. And it works. These guys have been finding my images for years. And then they take action. In some cases, at least they give you something that you can do if you want to put a claim or whatever. Places like Twitter, there's other social media, people are already sharing super high resolution images, and they're not really worried about that.
I mean, I kind of, it's unfortunate, but I kind of assume that anything that I share online, I've lost control over.
Yeah.
Effectively. Now, that doesn't mean I couldn't exert IP rights. I could still, go after someone. And, your story is a good example of needing to be vigilant. But the reality of a digital file is that if it's out there, it's out there. And then add to that a lot of these files are also being scraped to use for training for AI. So there's a whole other level of use.
What I wanted to say.
We don't anticipate.
Now with the AI, you don't have control any longer, because you make a picture and AI make a double of it or make it a little bit different, and then it's not my picture any longer. It's an AI picture which is going on internet, and you don't have control over it any longer.
So it's an interesting space.
Yeah, and you also have the other aspect is that a lot of people don't look at anything larger than on their phones, so they don't care. So if you never pick it up, put it on a large monitor, who cares? All you're looking at is your phone.
One thing that's come up. Oh, go ahead, John.
You told that you don't use Instagram because they have a square only.
Well, you can upload the other stuff, but it's fussy, and I still say the image quality is really bad.
Yeah, but nobody cares any
Yeah,
longer.
they
So
don't.
you
I
you
care.
you are the last of the Mohinicans, I think.
Well, this is a slightly different issue, but it kind of it's come up before for us. Like, we've lost, and it goes back maybe, Fernando, to what you said about, like changing uses of media and such, or changing context. There was a time when if you're evaluating a picture, you would be thinking about it as a printed image at a certain distance, and
Right.
you would think about resolution in relation to presentation size.
Right.
People will throw whatever size resolution image up on a big monitor and go in at 300% and then critique. It's kind of pointless depending on what
It
you're
is.
doing, but it gets to a place where that's actually not a valid
No.
resolution to be critiquing a photograph at, because that's not something that you could actually view as a human with your eyes without, enormous magnification. So, I think that the resolution that we have, 1024, is not sufficient to see
Correct.
details and things, but we don't necessarily need a 6K image to
No.
be able to critique a photo.
Now, I'll view
Depend-
things, large photos on a large monitor at 100%. And just because there are tiny nitpicky stuff in there, I won't cause it to be a free flight, but I will come up and say, you know what? You could do this. You can remove
Yeah.
these halos. I'll suggest that stuff to them, but
Yeah.
I don't veto it because of that. But I think viewing something at 100% is a valuable thing to do. And people saying viewing something at 100% is pixel peeping. I say that just means you should take better photos.
Yeah. Well, I said 300%, not 100%.
No,
So
yeah,
agree
I know
with
you did say
100%.
that. 300% is ridiculous.
But the
300% is good for editing.
Yeah.
It's
Your own
an
stuff.
unwritten rule that everybody looks at 100% at its photos because everybody is doing that. And then when you do it like this, it's no problem. But when you put it on 300% and you are going to edit your photo, you can see the borders. You can see where you have put light and not. So that's a different cookie because that's you compare things with each other, which are not comparable.
And I
Yeah.
think the picture, like Jeff, your picture of the stump of the tree,
Mhm.
that, I mean, yeah, it's okay. Like it's good there like that, but to zoom in to 100% and explore the textures of the stump, that's which you wouldn't do that in a gallery, but
Mhm.
you do have that luxury on a computer monitor. I think that's a totally valid way to enjoy a
Yep.
photograph.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think 100% you're fine. And the critique of the the what's called the masking errors that I made on that is absolutely fine. But I do see people going to pixel peeping for some of their critiques, and it's fine, but it doesn't kind of apply to real life exploration of photos.
Yeah.
But it is, I think, useful to talk about this because when we were talking earlier today about aspect ratio and size, like I'm moving more towards landscape in how I present photos, because more often than not, I look at photos now on electronic devices or sorry, on monitors. A lot of folks are going to portrait because they're looking at photos on phones. And that is having an influence on kind of dominant styles of photography. Especially the phones, the mobile devices, we're seeing far more in portrait mode in terms of a lot of the sharing sites and such.
Yeah, I think the original cell phone companies, particularly Apple, if you're shooting video, I think they should always flip it already, even if you're doing it vertically. Because vertical videos don't make any sense to me. Why? Like you don't go to a movie theater to get a big like rectangular thing.
It's a different aesthetic, Teddy.
Yeah. I think
they should not. They can do whatever they want.
Well,
and
sure, but I think
and
if
it's great that they're doing whatever they want, whether
I
we
think
like it or
if
not.
Apple would have automatically flipped that, nobody would have thought a thing about it. Everybody be shooting nice, 16 by 9 images, just like in a movie.
I have my iPhone, and the screensaver, right? And the desktop background, it's reading from my photos in the Photos app, and it's randomly grabbing photos that some algorithm is finding interesting, and these are landscape photos. and the algorithm is cropping the center part,
Yeah.
but not just the center. Sometimes it seems to be a little off center. It seems
Yeah.
to explore the photo and find a vertical crop that is going to look great on my phone. And guess what? It looks great. It looks fabulous. And now the phone is teaching me a different way to look at the landscape from a wide angle to a long lens with a portrait format. I would have never thought of that if it wasn't for the phone, to the point that now I'm thinking of maybe I should start doing that intentionally, start capturing photos that way.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And
We were talking about that earlier about portrait versus landscape.
I have an Insta360 camera that shoots
Mhm.
360 degrees, right? And then you have the option to choose your crop on when you're editing the video. And you can say, well, I want it square, I want it vertical, I want it panoramic, horizontal. All the information is there. If you present the video with one crop or the other, the result is completely different. You're telling a completely different story. And sometimes the vertical works very well because it keeps you focused on your attention focused right where you want it. A wider view, it allows the viewer to travel through which is great in other cases, right? We're used to, it's like when I was a kid, the TV sets were like 4x3. Now you cannot find a monitor or a TV set that is 4x3. They're all panoramic.
Yeah.
And we're used to that panoramic.
Well, people used to complain about the letterboxing because
Right.
but now we
Right.
don't have to worry about it.
So the whole aesthetic has changed, and now we're used to something different. And with phones, the whole aesthetic is changing, and a lot of the standardization happens when you send images for printing to the print lab. They're going to give you the choice. Okay, which format do you want it? 4x3, 8x10, 8.5 by 11, panoramic, 16 by whatever. You don't have the choice to print and frame the crop of your liking if it doesn't fit one of these standard sizes. You're going to have to lose part of the image or to incorporate something that
or they make it smaller, eh?
Right. And in most cases, I think I use Fine Art America. I think those guys allow for any size. Most people, you can see the photo streams in Flickr. It's just whatever sensor size they're using, that is the aspect ratio of the image they're uploading. Nobody thinks about cropping to different formats and different sizes. Not many.
Yeah. But what I do, I mean, I'm saying what people should do. People don't need to do what I'm doing, but what I do, I'm trying to improve my skills as a photographer and trying to master it as close as, or at least as close as I can to mastering. Yeah. And the last thing I want to fart around is with learning how Instagram works properly.
I made a joke, but format is important. It's really important.
One of the so when I started at some point choosing the banner for the group, that is all these elongate, and that is a crop from one of the submissions. Having to find a banner within the submissions, and that banner is a whole new image. It's an interesting exercise because not every. Sometimes the favorite submission that you say, I'm going to make a banner out of this image, it doesn't work. When you crop it for the banner, you can't find anything that works there.
You run into the kind of problem you do create a lot of PowerPoint presentations.
Right.
Yeah.
And but when you find that banner, all of a sudden it's a complete different image that is extracted from the original submission. It tells a whole different story sometimes. It's a whole different feeling.
other than different narrative, which is something
Different
I think
narrative,
we need to
right.
talk more about narratives. Yeah, at some point.
Well, and you've got
So-
dual challenges because you're both trying to pull the banner for the little kind of the
Right,
focus now,
right, right.
and then the
It's
other one.
two of them, yeah.
I've actually always been pretty impressed by what you pull off because I've had a few up on there
Well,
myself.
normally Sky is the one doing that.
Oh, okay. I think they generally work pretty well.
I do
I-
it when he's not able to do it, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But normally it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I think we need to. Well, I think it's good that we provide a large enough version. I honestly feel that when evaluating an image, pixel peeping is kind of detrimental. It's like, okay, you're going to find a blotch in my sensor that I should have cleaned up in Photoshop. Great.
Mhm.
What is the learning from there? What is the learning from there?
Well, I think it helps the
Absolutely
people to know that a lot of people don't even know it.
Well,
It's true.
they will find out. So the point is, what is the purpose? So if people don't care to fix that, they will not care to fix that.
Well,
Just
some
because you
people,
pointed that they need to clean up, they will not care to fix that.
well, a lot of people won't even
You can
notice it.
point at halos. Some people love halos, and they do that intentionally.
No, but
And
Good luck with
Uh,
that.
right, I don't, but
If
some
you want
people
to-
do.
if you want to
know,
publish your photo and you have halos, then you cannot go into an exhibition, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my point is, the more time you spend finding defects by pixel peep, the less you're developing your ability to find a narrative on the image, to find a story, to look at the artistic side of it. Images that are artistically rich, sometimes they're grainy, they're ragged, they don't have good detail that you can enjoy. You can only enjoy them when you look at the whole image from a distance, let's say. If you go in, they break apart very easily. And that is desired. That's what makes the image.
Well, there needs to be a balance, and that's the old history of photography thing. It went from like it was totally nothing but science and technique when they were creating photographs, and then you had pictorialism, was said no, we want our photographs to be more like paintings, and then of course we don't want them to look like paintings. So then you had Ansel Adams and his group with F64. They're wanting for this super technical stuff, and now after that, it's all bets are off at this point. However, it's always got to be a marriage of technical skills, and art. It can't all be, technical, but it does. Some technicals need to be considered. And if the first thing you see in a photograph is a technical flaw, that's and not just somebody like me, but if it's just immediately when you see that, that's not good.
And where does the flaw come from? Is the flaw?
Well, like if it's out of focus for no good reason, for probably one of the most.
And what about color?
The
Why are you so
color?
picky about focus? Why are you so picky
Color,
about
if it's too
grain,
much
and you're not picky
HDR,
about
for
color?
example, say if
Huh?
it's over saturation. I mean,
No, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about color fidelity, or what one would consider natural colors.
that's more subjective. That could be depending on the temperature of the light, like at sunset or in midday, or if it's like in a foggy sky or something like that. So that could be subjective. However, if the color is like cartoon colors, if something looks like more like an illustration than an actual real image, then it moves into the illustration and digital painting era, and that's fine if people do that. But that's no longer photography.
I can guarantee, and I'm willing to bet my money that any of my images that you see on your monitors is a completely different images from each other and from the one I uploaded and I can see in my computer in Flickr.
I wouldn't be surprised.
If we can put them side by side, they're going to look completely different. The colors are going to be off. They're going to be different images.
Well,
And if you look at the shadow detail, one of us are going to see better shadow details than the others, and the others is going to look all blotched out. The highlights may look blown out, depending on the quality of the monitor we have, the quality of the computer we have. So all these quality issue, detail issue, it's confusing because what you're judging is not necessarily what the author uploaded. What you're judging is what you see on your monitor.
I think you got a point that depending on the monitors, a variation between the monitors, but there isn't that big of a variation. When you get comments from all these different people saying, "Oh, the highlights are blown, the highlights are blown, the highlights are blown," that's probably not because of a variation of monitors.
Sometimes it is.
Well,
Sometimes it is. And the shadows also.
I adjust my monitors frequently with a detector and stuff. So, and I mean, you got to be careful that you don't get into the slippery slope of, well, just in case we're going to say this photo is okay, even though maybe it looked different on somebody's monitor. Wishful thinking should never be part of the process of evaluating photographs.
Yeah, I don't know that it is. I think it's just going back to what is the purpose? What are these people expecting in terms of feedback? And at the very basic is everybody wants to show a beautiful image. Everybody wants to feel, oh, I captured a beautiful image. And a beautiful image has more to do with the composition, with the artistry, with the colors or the tonalities, with the light, with the action, with the story and the narrative. And it has very little to do with a little sensor, dust on the sensor, or a scratch if it is a film scan, or little color variations from monitors to monitors. We have discussions in Weekly over the years where people say, hey, there's a lot of scratches that show up on the shadows. And other members say, well, I don't see any scratches. And well, what happens is that the one reporting the scratches has probably a high-end monitor with better dynamic range that is able to open up those shadows better than most people's do.
Well, you could argue too that since I'm just viewing this on my iPhone, it looks fine to me, and you're using a big monitor.
Right.
I mean, that's not a reasonable way to analyze a photograph.
Well,
I never veto a photo just because of minor things, but I will point them out to them in hopes that will help them to be a better photographer themselves.
Yeah, I agree with you, Teddy, because technical quality is an important thing of a photo.
But it's not black and white, guys. I'm not saying technical doesn't matter. I'm saying I agree with there has to be a balance. But I think when the emphasis is more on the artistic, then that high resolution is not so important anymore. I think for most purposes, 2048 these days is more than plenty.
2040, I agree. 2040.
And in many images, there was a member years ago. He would upload a thumbnail.
Mm-hmm.
He would give us a scan of a 120 film, and it was a thumbnail, 4x6. It was a 1 megapixels photo.
I think I know who you're talking about too.
He's no longer in the group.
I am moderator in another photography website, but when people are uploading lower than 900, then we don't put it on the website because we cannot judge it.
Yeah,
and I think that is part of the learning for us at providing feedback is, okay, let's provide feedback based on what we have. When you are not able to provide feedback with what's given to you, that's your limitation. It has nothing to do with the author. So how do we overcome those limitations? It's like, well, maybe you wish you were able to see high detail, and you can imagine that this image blown up would be fantastic, and you don't have any of that.
No, it didn't have to be, of course.
So
But now it's
what you have is that little thumbnail, and the thumbnail may be wonderful.
Well,
And
maybe
then
there's
it's-
no maybe in critique. That's wishful thinking. When I review photos, I try to say as much positive things into a photo as I can. I will, and if oftentimes I'll praise a photo highly, but then I'll also bring up and say, you know what, you might try this or that and the other, because I'm hoping in my advanced age, I'm going to be 73 next month. I want to pass on some of the stuff, my knowledge. So maybe I shouldn't be doing that, but I try to be both sides of that.
One topic came up in the thread where people were asking about the value of critiques and such, and one that I'm just going to interject in because I think it's relevant too, is that the person said, I can't remember who posted this, that if people are responding to their image, the image I've shown, and they're talking about its kind of impact and its story, and like the what it's conveying, that's when the person is happiest. If people are just talking about the technical quality of the picture, they feel that they've missed. And
that's what I'm talking about.
And it could well be, and I think I've certainly benefited from some of the awareness raising that I've gained through critiques. And I think, little things like, sweep your borders, check for spots, stuff like that. I agree with what Jan has said. It makes for a better presentation of your photograph. And it's kind of an unforced error to miss some of that stuff sometimes in one way of thinking. But some folks are just very, very, very focused on the technical side. And that is a way to critique a photo. Other people are looking at other kinds of things. But I do feel that I think a lot of us will put a photo forward first and foremost because we like it. We think it says something or it conveys something. And I think I certainly hope that it's technically competent to an extent, but I'll happily put up an underexposed, overexposed, out of focus image if I think it's a strong image, even with that technical flaw. But there's a reason I'm putting it forward because I like it. And even if I know that, like for instance, going back to my Canada geese that were in motion, I was pretty confident that one would be shot down pretty quickly, but I still like the photo. I wanted to show it to you because I was experimenting with that format, and I wanted to kind of get some feedback to it. So how people receive it as a photo, as a story, as an image matters too. And people will kind of pick the balance of how they look that or the technical aspects in terms of where they lean into their critique.
Depends on the kind of photograph as well, because
it does.
People who are shooting birds, well, they are mostly technical, looking at shooting how the feathers of the birds are, and that's different. If you are in the street and you want to do ICM, well, the sharpness is not so important because you want unsharp. But if, for example, you are making a photo of a bird, well, I can say that people who are doing that are looking at each other's work and look at the sharpness and the pixels because it's important.
Yeah, it's very important.
And the genre of that kind of photo, kind of will invite that kind of critique.
But there's two other things going on too, because none of us are professional writers, so we can be really awkward sometimes. And oftentimes when I try to I'll praise a photograph sometimes, but some of the things I'll try to suggest to help improve it, like removing halos or something like that, I'll have more text in that than anything else because it's hard to communicate that. There's a lot of stuff to say by the word count. But that doesn't mean I still don't think the photo is good. Maybe that comes up as lecturing or something like that because I'm not a professional writer. And I used to do technical emails to elevator sales reps and engineers with these really long technical emails. So that might be where I'm getting a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to be as fair as I can with my judgments. And but I want people to help them become better photographers, because if you don't look at stuff like the dust marks if your horizon's level on a landscape, or if you got halos, gosh, because a lot of those people don't even notice that.
Yeah.
And that is one way they can improve their own photography, especially if you want to try to move past just posting stuff on Facebook.
And
You
it
want to
depends on
actually
your
put it into
level.
exhibits.
It depends on your level as well. As you start, you don't know that you have to look at 100% at your photos. You just put it like you put it on Instagram. You
Yeah.
put it in Flickr.
Well, gosh, we're way over this. And Fernando, this was great. It was great to see you. You were a really good conversation.
Can I just
I've
make
been
one?
busy, guys. You have to remember I'm in Hawaii, so for me it's
Yeah.
7 a.m. in the morning
Poor
when you
baby.
guys start, and I can't always do it.
I just want to make one quick comment. While we were talking about that, I was taking some dust out of a picture that had a sky with a few dots on my sensor, but a bunch of cottonwood floating. And so I took one of those out and it replaced it with the AI with a full moon. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at this, I'm going, that's actually not half bad. So I will
Real
take it.
quick, so I didn't pay attention when the news came out about a week or two ago, because it's just another gizmo from Adobe. Adobe released an app, a camera app for the phone. It's called Project Indigo, and it does computational photography. And it's really impressive. I have to admit, if you look it up on the website Adobe Indigo or Project Indigo, check it out on your Chrome browser on your computer, because it does like extended dynamic. What they're doing is they're taking 32 images and combining
Yeah.
them into one, and they do that for sharpness. They do that to get rid of noise, or they do that to extend the dynamic range without being HDR.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing wrong with the HDR, just when people overdo it. So,
Correct.
but yeah, is this specific? Did you say it's
When you
specific to
look
phones?
at when you look at the photos from that camera on your phone compared to a photo taken with a Apple camera, the camera app that comes with
Yeah.
the phone, or any other camera app, the contrast, the dynamic range, the light, it's like, whoa! It's almost like looking at a slide. It is like looking at a slide.
Well, look at that.
It's comparing. It's the difference between a slide and a paper print. It's like, whoa! It comes alive. So that's coming up, guys, and that is computational photography from a phone. And when they start combining, so the phones are taking offering already 48 megapixels, whatever. And if that is from stacking 32 frames, they're gonna get to a point, I think, that the quality will be equivalent to a DSLR or a larger camera.
I think there's a bottleneck with that, though, and that is that there's tiny lenses on phones. There's a reason why we have big glass on our cameras. So, yeah, but I agree. I mean, I'm often talk dirt about phones and stuff like that, but I love my phone, and there's so much practical stuff you can do with it. And sometimes you don't have time. Last week, I did a picture out of a window of a sunset on an airplane, and I didn't have time to get my Nikon out from my backpack under the seat. So I snapped that picture of the window, and it turned out pretty good.
I've been to the national parks here, and I have my DA50 with all my bag full of lenses and swapping lenses, and I have the two bodies hanging on my neck and heavy, and I have my phone and also my tripods, and oftentimes before setting up my tripod and moving my big lenses again, I just snap a photo with my phone, and I intentionally took the two versions of the image. And for most purposes, what I get from the phone is just fine. If I was printing professionally, or if I was selling prints, well, there's no question I would go for the full frame. But for sharing with friends and family,
Oh yeah,
and on social media,
I put stuff in my journal, and it's perfect for that kind of stuff. Also, when you were describing that, when you get your camera all set up and everything, one thing that really makes me feel good when I finally get my tripod set up at the right angle, I'll step back and use my phone to take a picture of the camera
Right.
with the scene in the background. You know, like, oh yeah, it's very satisfying.
So that is coming. Another thing they do is when you zoom in with your phone to take the photo, they will use AI to supersize the crop, and so they're restoring quality, and they do a nice job there also. The way, so it's an alternative. I think it is AI properly used. And these are the new tools and technologies that are coming out.
Yeah, AI is like a different. It's like fire. You can get burned, but it's great. And I still don't think it is AI. I think AI is yet to come. And then what it is, we aren't going to be too happy about it.
Well, once AI is here, we will not be taking photos anymore.
Yeah, we might not even be alive anymore.
We'll be back.
Everything's gonna be
Years
generated.
it's there. In 2
They gotta
years,
make
you
it-
don't have a job.
They might not make it all the way to Hawaii, though, Fernando. Yeah. All right, guys.
Enjoy
Good night.
the evening
Next
tonight.
week, same time, same place. Yeah, it's great to see you, Fernando. We'll see you. See you. Bye.
Great seeing you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.